Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us on yet another edifying edition of the program You and Your Health aired on Equinoxe Radio Multimedia. For presentation, I am Immaculate Fogwe. There is a huge stigma surrounding people suffering with Down syndrome. Parents taking care of children suffering with this disease usually encounter a lot of challenges. On today's edition of the program, we'll tell you about some techniques which, if parents can apply, it will definitely help them manage such conditions. And with me in the studio is my co-host, AC Lucy Liengo. Hello, Lucy.
Hello, Immaculate. Dear listeners, thanks for joining us on yet another edition of the program You and the Health. With us here in the studio is Dr. Berinui Irene. Good day, Doctor.
Good day, my dear. Thank you so much for having me once more here on set. I really appreciate it.
Okay, Doctor, you're welcome. And Doctor, today we are talking about Down syndrome. What should a layman understand about Down syndrome?
Okay, for a layman, I would first of all define what Down syndrome is all about. Down syndrome is a chromosomal 21 disorder, otherwise known as trisomy 21. It causes developmental and intellectual delay. Normally, a regular baby is born with 46 chromosomes, but the Down baby is born with a pair or an extra copy of the 21 chromosome, an extra copy of the 21 chromosome. And most of these babies, they are usually regular babies. They are healthy babies, and these babies, they usually have the same they have the same kind of physical features. I'm going to explain a little bit because I mentioned chromosomes. Chromosomes basically are tiny packages that are found in cells, and these cells, they contain genes, and our genes, they contain information called DNA. This DNA, they control how you look and how your body functions. So I would equally like the layman to understand a little bit of how the Down syndrome, how it was discovered, or who discovered Down syndrome. There was this, in the 19th century, there was this doctor called Langdon Down. He discovered the Down syndrome, and he initially called it mongoloid. Why? Because he observed that the people who had Down syndrome, as at that time, they resembled a group of people from the Mongolian race. That's why you may have heard of the term Mongolian idiot. So this, after many years after that, you have the French geneticists who equally discovered the chromosome aberration. So I would equally like the layman to understand that there are physical features that are akin to those who are suffering from Down syndrome. You have immediately a baby is born, there could be initial diagnostics by the provider of the baby. You have the most apparent one, which is an upward slanted eyes. You have the children, they have short palms with short fingers. Most of the kids, they have one crease or line in their palms. Most of these children, they equally have loose joints. Most of them, their tongue, if you notice, most of the children, their tongues tend to stick out of their mouth. Most of them, they have a short head, they have short faces, they have a short neck. Most of them, if you look at their toes, they have a deep groove in between the first and the second toe. So that's what the physical signs and symptoms that are akin to those suffering from Down syndrome. You equally have behavioral problems that they face. Most of them, they have attention span, poor attention span. They have they are unable. They have poor judgment. And some of them are aggressive. So basically, this is it about Down syndrome. And I want to emphasize here that Down syndrome is not a mental disorder. It is a common variation in human form. And there are three types of Down syndrome. You have the trisomy 21, which is the most common Down syndrome, which is about 95% of people who are suffering from Down syndrome, they fall in this category. You equally have the translocation. 3 to 4% of persons suffering from Down syndrome, they belong to this category. And the mosaicism, just 1% of persons who are suffering from Down syndrome fall in this category. So basically, this is what the layman should understand about Down syndrome.
And doctor, how, like you living with Down syndrome, how do you behave? How do you tend to behave?
Okay, most of the persons suffering from Down syndrome, they have mild to moderate intellectual disabilities, and some specific changes could include poor attention span, like I mentioned already, verbal memory, ineffective communication. And there are some problems that are common to children suffering from Down syndrome. You have, I already mentioned, aggression, you have impulsive behavior, you have throwing tantrums, you have children who fail to follow instructions. You see, and then these problems they tend to alter the child's lifestyle, and then they cause a lot of stress to the parents and to the care providers of the children.
Who is more likely to have a child suffering with Down syndrome?
Okay, a lot of women who are basically 35 years and above are prone to having children with Down syndrome. But, however, you have most of the children born with Down syndrome are born to mothers 35 years and younger. Why? Because many of them fall in this category of younger women.
So does it mean it's not hereditary, given that it's a particular age that is likely to have children of such children?
No. Down syndrome basically is not, most of the Down syndrome sufferers is not hereditary. Why? Because it is caused by trisomy 21, which is as a result of an error during the formation of the reproduction of the cell in a parent. And most of this, the three types of Down syndrome, they are mostly caused by genetic conditions. So it's just 1% that is hereditary.
So those who have this Down syndrome, are they able to communicate?
No. They have speech and speech language problems, disabilities. Why? Because they have this difficulties in auditory tonal processing. As in, most of them, they would prefer to have facial expressions. They'll prefer to communicate with their actions in response to others rather than using a particular form of language. And the main problem they face is that their speech is difficult to understand. You as a layperson, you find it difficult to understand their speech.
So those who take care of these Down syndrome children, be it parents or caretakers, what are some of the challenges they face while taking care of them?
They face a lot of challenges. Many of them, they get to the point of being really stressed out. Many of them they develop mental exhaustion. Many of them, they are worried, they are concerned about the child's future. Many of them, they struggle with bias, with stigma, with discrimination. Many of them, they have concerns about the child's health and education. Some of them, they're just emotionally burdened. So they face a lot of challenges when it comes to handling or managing children with Down syndrome.
What's the biggest misconception the society has as far as Down syndrome children are concerned?
Okay, basically there are some misconceptions I'm going to just enumerate here. You have, one of them is that the society feels or they think that the children suffering from Down syndrome do not attend regular schools. That's not true. I already mentioned a while back that most children suffering from Down syndrome, they have mild to moderate intellectual disability, so they can fit in regular schools. And many of them, they live healthy lives, active lives, you understand. Another misconception is that some of them are obese, which is not true, because some people suffering from Down syndrome, at birth, they inherit some health defects. I should have mentioned some of them, which some health defects are like obesity, digestive problems, eye problems, ear infection, sleep apnea, congestive heart defects, and so on. So some of them, even though the obesity it comorbids with Down syndrome, but some of them they're not obese.
You talked about the fact that they can go to school like any other child,
Yes.
but then they will not be able to grasp the same information another child is supposed to get, or let's say an ordinary child is supposed to get. Doesn't
Yes.
mean this particular people should have a particular type of school where they can get this knowledge rightly.
Yes, there are some of them who actually need certain specific needs. Their needs are much more than others. There are many of them, like I said, they have mild to moderate. It is rare you have a few of them that really have rare intellectual disabilities, but those who are suffering from the rare cases, you send them to special needs school. So basically that is it.
Is there any support for parents who have children suffering with this disease?
Oh yes, there is. You have parents managing children with Down syndrome. They could associate themselves with they liaise themselves with other parents whose children are equally suffering from Down syndrome. In so doing, it helps them to ease their fears and their concerns. We equally have organizations that are focused on helping children and persons with Down syndrome. You have in America the National Organization of Down Syndrome. You have even here in Cameroon, Down Syndrome Association. You have in Bamenda the Adrikins Foundation. So a lot of people are beginning to, they're supportive of this health issue. And also you have certain persons who who decide to, okay, there are some women or there are some parents who put on certain symbols whenever they attend some of these functions, whenever they attend maybe meetings in such organizations. You have, I don't know if you have ever seen the 3 arrows symbol. The 3 arrows symbol signifies 3 is a chromosome 21, because normally the chromosomes are in pairs of 2 but the extra pair makes the chromosome 21 3. It groups it into 3. So that 3 signifies the chromosome 21, and the arrow signifies an upward movement, as in the parents are rising out of turbulence, out of pain, out of depression. So basically there is support. There's a lot of support. So
doctor, is there a stigma that surrounds parents or children having the Down syndrome?
Yes. You have people, many persons, again I would mention, many people suffering from Down syndrome, they have mild to moderate intellectual disability, and they equally have learning disabilities. You have some parents who are outright discriminative. They will tell their children, maybe their children who are faring well academically in school, do not associate yourself with this child. He's a dunce or she's a dunce. They don't score high and stuff. So those are acts of discrimination. And also, before, historically, people suffering from Down syndrome were put together. They were put together in colonies. So those were acts of outright discrimination and stigma.
Okay, doctor, people suffering with Down syndrome have seen their life expectancy double since the 1980s. What advances in medicine would have likely helped those to maybe help their life expectancy figures to rise?
Okay, before, like in the 80s, 1983 to be precise, people suffering from Down syndrome, their life expectancy was 25 years, but it has doubled since then. Why? Because there has been a lot of advances in the medical field. For example, you have the correctional heart surgeries. There has been advances in that, and a lot of people suffering from Down syndrome, they have moved to about 80% of life expectancy. As in, people with Down syndrome, they can live from 60 years and even way beyond 60 years.
You just mentioned something about correctional heart. Okay, I would like to know, does it mean there is a cure for that disease?
Okay, there is no standard treatment for people suffering from Down syndrome, but however, there are treatments for people suffering from Down syndrome depending on their intellectual and physical disabilities, their strengths, their limitations. And there are some resources that are meted out for these people, as in you have therapies that can help them to reach their full potentials. Therapies such as speech therapies, occupational therapies, physical therapies helps those people to really.
Is there any similarity between dyslexia and Down syndrome?
Yeah, not really. Dyslexia is a learning disability, but Down syndrome, those suffering from Down syndrome, many of them have learning disabilities. So many of them, it comorbids with Down syndrome.
And doctor, what about autistic children or something like that? Is there a difference or similarities between autistic children and Down syndrome? Because I feel like they are almost the same.
They are almost the same, but they are not the same. Those autistic children, they have their signs and symptoms, their own characteristics. Some of them they avoid eye contact, just like those suffering from Down syndrome. But many of them are hyperactive, and it's not all sufferers of Down syndrome or all the children suffering from Down syndrome that are hyperactive. So there are some similarities and there are some differences as well.
What's your hope for children living with a disease at the moment?
Oh my, a lot. The people living with Down syndrome, like I said, it is not a mental disorder. They live active and healthy lives, as in they are able to engage themselves in many activities, they socialize, they do one or two things to make their lives better. And many of these people, they live up to 60 years and above, like I said. And I have success stories of certain persons suffering from Down syndrome. You have the story of this lady, she's based in the US, Daniela, a 19-year-old lady. She owns a flower business. If you see the way she pampers, she treats her flowers delicately as though her life depends on it. She is so concerned about her flowers. She knows when to water them. She knows the right nutrients they need. She knows when to give them the right amount of sunlight and stuff like that. So hers is a story of inspiration. You equally have another super story of someone suffering from Down syndrome. His name is John Cronin. He's in the US, the CEO or the co-CEO of Crazy Socks company. It's a company that deals with, because he used to love wearing a lot of socks, different kinds of socks. So he formed this company, and this company today has helped a lot of regular people as well as people who are disabled to live wonderful lives. I mean, it helps them to put food on their table. So people are living lives, successful lives with Down syndrome.
Thank you so much for being part of the program today.
You're welcome.
Thank you to Lucy for being part of the program.
It's a pleasure.
Then thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your keen attention. We had as guest Beringe Irene. She is a mental health nurse, and that's what put a cap to today's edition of the program You and Your Health on Equinoxe Radio Multimedia. For presentation, I am Immaculate Fogwe. Stay in the company of more interesting programs on Equinoxe Radio and, of course, television. So long.